Am I the butthole for suggesting my wife consider a new therapist? Oh boy, here we go. If my wife has one big flaw, it's jealousy. She has areas in life she doesn't feel she measures up: her career, personal projects, and looks, and if someone in her life succeeds in one of these areas and outdoes her, she's outwardly congratulatory but inside she's grieving her own lack of accomplishment. For instance, she's been overweight/out of shape her whole life, but when person X runs a marathon, something she's never wanted to do, she still feels unworthy. It really prevents her from being happy in life. So 6 months ago she finally decided to seek therapy. She found a Skype therapist and really enjoys her sessions. And things have changed. A lot. This therapist is really big on self-compassion, being kind to yourself, choosing things that bring you joy, etc. My wife is hard on herself, so this all sounded great. But I feel like things have been taken to an extreme. She has distanced herself from a ton of people in her life, including close family members and friends, due to their successes. She claims being kind to herself means avoiding their accomplishments. She no longer tries at any of the hobbies she wanted to achieve in. She spends her evenings after work watching TV, eating junk food, etc. She's choosing joy. But to me she doesn't seem all that happy. It just seems like she's trying to protect herself from the world and her therapist is encouraging it. So when she told me she decided to stop writing, her biggest dream in life, because she'll never finish the novel, I suggested a new therapist. This ended an argument and she's not really speaking to me right now. Am I the butthole? Not the butthole. Either this therapist is a total hack or your wife is deliberately misconstruing good advice as a way to justify giving up on life entirely. After all, you can't fail if you don't try. You're definitely not a butthole for being concerned about your wife and you're only trying to help her. Original poster replies: I don't know if the therapist is a hack, but this doesn't really feel like good advice to me. Before therapy, my wife would always cycle between living her life, getting upset at other people's success, giving up, getting inspired, and then back around. Now it just feels like she's stuck in the giving up stage. I mean, being kind to yourself and choosing things that bring you joy definitely isn't bad advice at all. I just don't think your wife is in a place where she can practice that in a healthy way. It can also backfire where you self-soothe with stuff, and then wind up with a stuffed horse collection that's taken over your bedroom. I need to see this collection, if it exists. Self-soothing and ending up with a collection of stuffed animals may have happened with a friend of mine. The friend is me. Truly great comment. If people find joy in fandoms or collectible things, is it wrong if there isn't hoarding/space/money issues? I'm on that fine line before hoarding, laughing my butt off. If I had more money, I would probably be drowning in, well, a lot of things, but Funko Pop figures and Legos are at the top. At least a lot of the Funko Pops are relatively inexpensive. My third Bucky Barnes actually just got here today, but Legos definitely aren't. When I was younger, I thought they'd get less expensive over time, but nope. My Squishmallow army agrees with this comment. A therapist is supposed to recognize these things and provide meaningful help for a client to progress. Either the therapist is failing at doing that, or the wife isn't being authentic with the therapist. For the outcome above to happen, some part of that dynamic is failing. I was coming here to say this. The wife needs to be able to be honest enough with the therapist and tell the therapist how self-compassion is manifesting, specifically. Chances are the wife is telling the therapist, yep, everything is so great now that I've distanced myself from the self-perceived toxicity, but isn't telling the therapist that she now engages in excessive amounts of unhealthy behavior. I hope Original Poster can convince his wife to be brutally honest about what her day-to-day reality is now. Perhaps, Original Poster, you can offer to participate in couples therapy as well as encourage her to continue on her own therapy. The therapist might be fine, but the wife could be not communicating well. The wife could be claiming that these people are rubbing their accomplishments in her face or constantly bragging, which she may even believe is true. The therapist hears this and says to stay away from toxic people, which is good advice, but because the therapist doesn't know the full story, it ends up being bad advice. Which is why one option I presented for the problem was the wife not being authentic. For me, authenticity is her representing what her behavior is accurately, and what the changes she is doing are accurately. Agreed. I had to stop hanging out with a friend who used to compete in fitness competitions and even though she's retired, would constantly critique the 1 ounce of body fat she had. I couldn't imagine what she must think of my average body when we went to the beach. The mental stress started to outweigh any fun I might have had hanging out with her, so I stopped until I got in a better place mentally. Oh yes, I had a friend who got obsessively into weight loss, and probably had developed an eating disorder, who would post things like I used to be so fat at 126 pounds, feeling so much better now at 119. I just quietly let that friendship wither and die. If it makes you feel any better, I'm skinny and hate my body but somehow don't hate other normal-sized people's bodies. I'm jealous and wish I could look that good, but I still feel like I need to be skinner to be attractive. It's a brutal cycle. I totally understand needing to distance yourself from someone like that though. I was pretty insufferable when I was excited about my weight loss. Especially since I wasn't overweight in the first place. Honestly? She probably didn't think about your body at all. Most people like that are so involved in their own disordered body image that other people's bodies don't register. Not the butthole. And I worry about you, original poster. How this is affecting you as part of this couple. Will there ever be any couples therapy time or just for her? I think perhaps she is only hearing what she wants to hear from the therapist, only taking away from therapy what sounds right to her. I am sorry, this doesn't sound like a healthy way to live her life. Please take care of you. You have the right to be emotionally happy as well. Original poster replies. Other than my concern for her, none of this has really affected me. Although I do wonder how she'll react if I decide to improve myself in some way. Will she distance herself from me, too? This is a very valid question, original poster. If you take up a new hobby, get a new friend, want to visit new places, vacation, new job? I just felt like lonely marriage when I read your original post and I felt sad for you as well as concern for your wife. Original poster replies. I thought about that. Thankfully, I've been basically the same for the past several years and I'm okay with that, but yeah. Is it possible you are also stuck in the given up stage? Maybe you do want to try new things and keep growing but you're scared of hurting your wife and you've convinced yourself over the years that you are okay with it. Just don't want you to get stuck in the same place for a decade then looking back with regret and resentment. Have you considered couples counseling? You both kind of sound stuck to me. Me too. Honestly, I'm surprised that original poster seems content with the life they've described. But what about when you're not? People change and that's a necessary part of life. And how long before she can't go to work because her boss makes more money or told her coworker they did a good job? How long before not doing much of anything becomes literally doing nothing and developing health problems from lack of movement and poor nutrition? Really? The fact that your wife is isolating herself and giving up on all her interests doesn't affect you. That's a terrible sign for your life together. I think's idea about couples therapy is a good way to get her in front of another therapist, without pushing the idea that her current therapist is trash. Especially since it sounds like you two could benefit from couples therapy because this sounds like a terrible way to share a home. Web link. I would suggest a couples session with her therapist. You can express your concerns and hear what your wife has to say. It's common for spouses or a family member to join a counseling session every now and then. My therapist gives me similar advice, and honestly, there have been times where being kind to myself and celebrating my successes meant celebrating showering that day. She has never told me to avoid my friends / their accomplishments, only to not judge myself based on them. Not the butthole. Your wife sounds like she's twisting what her therapist says or the therapist is very much not doing their job right. Yes. Or the wife is just misapplying the advice and things she's been working on. It doesn't sound like she's twisting the advice of the therapist, just maybe not there yet on truly understanding it. And we can't fault her. It's been 6 months. I had a lot to work on still after only 6 months of therapy. Right. The proper advice seems to be to continue writing your novel if you enjoy writing and do it only because you enjoy writing, not to compare it to someone else. Of course. We know that. But original poster's wife is working through therapy towards that kind of mindset. Obviously, she's not there yet. That's okay. That she stopped doing the things she loves isn't very surprising considering she's been in therapy. Many people in therapy do this, not because their therapist advises them to do so. There's not a therapist out there who would tell a patient to just cut out everything and everyone in a person's life. I can guarantee the therapist did not tell original poster's wife to do that, but it's a byproduct of finally confronting the things and people in your life and your experiences, and questioning their benefit and role. Therapist here, original poster. Not to be overly defensive of our profession, I've met my share of shrinks that I'd never go to myself. It wouldn't be the first time a patient has heard what they wanted to hear or misconstrued it. Would your wife be open to you talking about it, possibly with the therapist as a couple? I've got a friend who comes round 2 hours after her therapy and you wouldn't believe the crap her therapist said. Anything ranging from her therapist told her to impulse buy a 500-pound dress to her therapist told her she was unfixable since she hates herself. It usually goes through a few rounds of is that really what she said? Well, no, but it's what she meant to get the truth out of her. I was thinking the same thing. Suggest a couples session so that you two can understand the goals of therapy. Be positive about it, then assess what is going on once you meet and explain the situation to the therapist and see what is said. Were those cycles corresponding to her menstrual cycle at all? Normally I hate that excuse, especially when used just to invalidate someone, but I found my own cycle of self-improvement and self-destruction were following my menstrual cycle. I have PMDD and have to take a short course of antidepressants to ward off the destructive part of my cycle. She's probably not being entirely honest with the therapist about how she's behaving. Most therapists wouldn't tell you to avoid friends/family who make you jealous. Her new way of coping is something that she should bring up with her therapist. She is probably misinterpreting their advice or taking it to an extreme that the therapist did not intend. Either way, it needs to be addressed during their session. Not the butthole. She's not choosing joy, though. She's choosing complacency and avoidance and mistaking that for joy because it feels better than self-loathing. I wonder if her therapist is aware of the choices she's actually making. The idea of the advice was good, but, based on what you said, it was vague. I'm no psychologist, but her psych should have guided her with, like, small steps on how to do it. As someone who does the exact same effing thing your wife does, the cycle thing, I can say that feeling does feel so crappy, and I can see myself falling into the same thing she did without proper guidance. I'm happy, and you're also 101%, not the butthole, that you're helping your wife get out of this cycle. Getting a new therapist is, I guess, taxing but normal. My cousin said you really have to find the therapist that just clicks with you / or what works. On the other hand, how is this affecting you / your relationship in general? It's honestly a concern. I hope you don't neglect your own well-being, original poster. Yeah, not the butthole. It sounds like she's taking the advice to choose joy, and deciding that means never choose anything that causes you any discomfort, rather than what brings you actual joy. Discomfort often leads to growth and improvement. Stagnation is easy. It sounds like she's caught in being stagnate because it's easier. It's easier than having to confront the reason for feeling inadequate. It's easier than trying something new and not being great at it right away. It sounds like the therapist isn't necessarily giving bad advice, but maybe needs to elaborate on what is meant. It's hard to say without knowing exactly what is said, because often people hear what they want rather than what is being said, so if this is all coming from your wife, it may be a skewed perspective on what is being said. Is it possible for you to ask to sit in on a session with a therapist so you can speak to them as well? Or have a couples session so you can gently convey these concerns? Yeah, under good advice, being kind to yourself and choosing joy means choosing not compare yourself to others and finding things to be happy about, i.e. that person did a marathon. I never wanted to do a marathon, so I don't need to even think about if they are better than me. That was their dream. They achieved it, good for them, let's celebrate them achieving their dream. It does not mean doing what your wife is doing. Being kind to yourself do mean giving up in the face of others' success. It means acknowledging that their success does not infringe on your own and not letting the success of others make you unhappy. I think if your wife has gone this extreme, then I cannot imagine her therapist not being aware. Therapist here. These are avoidance behaviors. In this case, avoiding emotional pain and distress. I'm sure therapist knows this. It is not uncommon for patients to regress before moving ahead. And of course, it's possible this therapist sucks. Just like in any profession, you'll find stellar, average, and crap therapists out there. And unfortunately, Recommendations aren't always helpful because my great therapist may be your terrible therapist no matter how skilled the therapist is. Just the nature of therapy. Edit. Word. I have a severe fear of failure. It often causes me to feel like you're describing. I highly advise your wife find a new therapist, but I don't know what you can say to make her see. If it were me, any excuse to give up would be enough. Maybe she will get bored of therapy and eventually change habits again. It's a really tough and crafty thing, but be hopeful. Just be there for her right now, let her know that you want her to be happy, but she doesn't seem happy. She could be grieving the way she's been living her life. I doubt the therapist is a hack or the wife is deliberate in her interpretations of the advice. I highly doubt the therapist is telling the wife to distance herself from loved ones or give up dreams. I think the wife is just working through her emotions and who she is for likely the first time ever, and this is how she is applying, albeit messily, mindfulness and self-care for likely the first time ever. It is entirely possible, and even likely, that she will realize that maybe she doesn't need to distance herself from everyone just because their success makes her feel bad. In fact, continued therapy should help her understand and feel herself that if one is confident and mentally well, the success of other people doesn't make us feel bad. She's not there yet. But it sounds like she is working through it. 6 months of therapy isn't very long, though. I wholeheartedly second this. Therapy takes a lot of time and she's probably unlearning a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms, codependencies, and traumas from her family of origin. It is a messy process, and while it doesn't sound like she's doing things right yet, this might be part of her process. Before recommending a different therapist, it might be helpful for the two of you to have a couples session. Yes. All of this. That being said, the two need to communicate better. Original poster needs to give her more space. Instead of judging and rushing to recommend a new therapist, he should try to understand where she's at and support her on this journey. Maybe she only wanted to write to prove something to other people. Maybe she liked it at one point but has lost the passion to this competitive feeling. It's going to take time to find that passion again, and maybe it'll be for something different. I'd say it's a light you're the butthole. Therapy is not an instant cure. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.